Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. We promote positive method of training and behavior modification through stress-free methods. As part of that mission, we offer free webinars like the one you're about to watch. Subjects range from dog behavior, stress-free training, and other tools to help you understand your relationship with your dog. If you like the webinar, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified when future videos are posted. Now enjoy the webinar.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on how to build reliable behavior. Our speaker today is Laura Sharkey, who will be joined during questions by fellow trainer Erica Pitlavani. Laura has owned and led WOOFS Dog Training Center since 2002. A Karen Pryor certified trainer, Laura regularly presents to her peers at professional training conferences across the country. Her strong science background, including a PhD in molecular biology, drew her to the modern, humane, rewards-based training methods used at WOOFS. Please put your questions in chat. Erica will be monitoring chat, and some questions may be answered during the presentation. Others will wait until the end, but we will get to as many as possible. With no further ado, let's get going. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad everybody is here, and I'm hoping to have some good conversation about building reliable behaviors. And I think I fought for this topic because it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, because building reliable behaviors is really the holy grail of dog training. It is the goal that it's the holy grail of dog training, because the whole point of training any behavior is so that the dog will do it when you ask, so that it is reliable. And I think there is I think trainers could be doing a better job of teaching this. And I think part of that requires a paradigm shift in what we think training a dog is. And that could be a completely separate topic, and I'm not going to go into it too much. But training a dog is not taking one 7-week class and saying, oh, my dog is trained. One 7-week group class is at best an introduction to dog training. And if we think about what you do need to do to get reliable behaviors, I encourage everybody who gets a puppy to train, to put the dog in a class of some sort for the first 2 years of its life. And people are like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had to do so much. And you don't have to. And a lot of this depends on what you want from your dog. But one 7-week class isn't going to be like, okay, the dog is trained, it can do everything I want all the time. That's not how this works. And I always like to compare it to a kid. I figure if you've got a child, you've got to do, 12 years of primary school, kindergarten, first grade, up till, 12th grade. And then if you're lucky, after 12th grade, you get another 4 years of college. So that's 16 years of education to get you into an adult. And I'm thinking, for a puppy, you only need 2 years. And I think that's a bargain. But what I want to do today is give you a step-by-step training plan to help you take the behaviors that you want and make them really reliable and consistent for you and your dog. And all you need to do is follow the plan. So, how do you build a reliable behavior? 1, pick a behavior. What behavior do you want to train? You can't say all of them, right? Because you have to build this house one brick at a time. So I'm going to say first thing you're going to want to do is pick a behavior. Pick the behavior that's most important to you. Then train it at home with positive reinforcement methods. 3, practice it every single day without fail. You must practice this behavior. Then practice it in all the locations you want it to be reliable in. And then step number 5, never stop using treats. Never, ever stop reinforcing this behavior if you find it, if it's valuable and you want it to remain reliable. So that's it. 5 steps. Pick the behavior, train it, practice it. Practice it, I call it on the road in the locations you want it, and reinforce it consistently and forever. And that's how you get a reliable behavior. If you practice those 5 steps, if you follow those 5 steps, that is your training plan. So that's it. Just do that. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day. Except it's not quite that easy, right? The devil is in the details. So what I want to present today is those 5 steps in more detail. And so we're going to sort of dive in deeper and look at this on a smaller macro scale, but then we're going to sort of focus back out to the basics again, because I don't want this to be like, oh my God, I could never do all of that. You can. Everybody can do that. And we're going to talk a lot about splitting, not lumping. If you haven't heard that term before, it's really important in dog training, and it's really important in building reliable behaviors. I'll get back to that in a minute. Let's get back to our 5 steps. We're going to go through these in order. We're going to start with picking a behavior. First, pick your number 1 most important behavior. What is the thing that matters most to you? For me, it's a recall. I don't care if my dogs don't know how to do anything else. I want my dogs to come when I call them, and I want that to be reliable in all circumstances. Then, if you're an overachiever, I'm going to have you pick a second most important behavior, because we can work on 2 things at the same time. For me, it's a downstay. Okay. So for me, my dogs need to have a solid recall and a solid downstay. And I'm going to tell everybody, I want you to rethink what is important to you, because every dog in the world can live a really functional, reliable life with just these 2 behaviors. Okay. If you need to get your dog to you, you can get them with a recall. And if you need them to not move or discontinue anything that they're doing, you can do that with a downstay. These 2 behaviors will get a dog through their entire life. For me, everything else is gravy. A sit is gravy, a spin, everything else that you might want to teach your dog is just extra. So I like to focus on these 2 behaviors. And for me, that's a bite-sized chunk of work. Second step, teach it with positive reinforcement. Obviously, I'm a positive reinforcement trainer. I believe in the methods. And one of the things I will tell you about reliable behavior, we can argue all we want about whether punishment training works, but the most important thing to know is that positive training will get you a more reliable behavior over punishment-based training any day of the week. The reason this is because positive-based training gives the dog the choice. And if the dog chooses to respond, it's a much more powerful behavior than if they're forced to respond. Because if they're forced to respond to a behavior because they're afraid of a pinch or a shock or something like that, or a punishment, anytime they think they can get out of the punishment, they don't have to respond. Whereas with positive-based training, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make the dog want to do the behavior. If the dog is a willing participant and they want to do the behavior, that is going to make that behavior really, truly reliable, because the dog wants to. I'm not fighting against the dog. We're working together. We're like, yeah, let's do this, right? So positive training is really going to be much more reliable in the end. The second thing is positive training is a partnership. It is not a top down. And to really, truly get a reliable behavior, you have to be in partnership with your dog. For me, dog training, or I won't even say dog training, my existence with my dogs it's like a dance. And if you've ever taken ballroom dancing lessons, you know that you need to work together. The two people who are doing the dance need to work together. And one person is the lead, right? In your dog training dance, in your dog training partnership, you're the lead. So you've got to step up and you've got to be a good leader. A good lead is invaluable, right? They're subtle but clear. If you're dancing, they're saying, okay, we're going to spin to the right, or we're going to take steps to the left, or now I'm going to send you away from me, and now I'm going to twirl you. So they're subtle, but they're clear. Because if you're the follower, you don't know what's happening. That creates tension and fear, and things aren't going to look good. A lead also makes a suggestion. Okay, I'm suggesting we're going to go to the right now, and then the person who's following can go to the right. If they don't, then the lead's got to make another suggestion. Finally, the lead needs to be considerate. You need to think, okay, so I know my partner today has a sprained ankle, and so I'm not going to ask them to spin on their right leg today. I'm going to do some other things. So you have to take your partner into consideration when you're the lead, okay? And all three of these things are going to be really important. We're going to talk about some other things later, but all three of these things are really important when you're working with your dog. You want to be subtle but clear. You want to make suggestions about what you're going to do as a team, and you want to be considerate of what their needs are. So I want to touch on what reinforcement even means, right? Because we're always like positive reinforcement, positive reinforcement. And what reinforce actually means, the word reinforce, it means to make something stronger. And when we're reinforcing a behavior, we're not just treating the behavior. There's a huge difference between treating a behavior, giving a cookie, giving a reward, giving some, good dog, attaboys kind of thing. That's not reinforcement. Reinforcement actually makes the thing stronger. If you reinforce a wall, you're making it stronger. If you reinforce a levee, you're making it stronger. So the whole idea of reinforcing a behavior is that you're continuously building it. You're continuously making it stronger than it was yesterday. So we don't call it positive treating. We call it positive reinforcement. Reinforcement is a really powerful word, and it means to make, in the dog training world, it means to make a behavior more likely to occur again in the future. We're making that behavior stronger. And that's a really, really important distinction. And people who say, oh, you're just cookie pushers, they don't understand what reinforcement is. It's not just giving cookies. It's not just rewards. It's strategically building up a behavior. It's like a wall or a bank account. I want to reinforce my bank account with more money. I guess I shouldn't have been a dog trainer, but whatever. Step number 3, practice every day. Practice every single day. Any behavior that you want to be reliable needs to be practiced and perfected so that it holds up under stress. If you're saying you want to use this behavior and you want it to happen every time you ask for it, it needs to hold up under all sorts of conditions. You want to strengthen the levee so that when a storm comes, it's reinforced and can bear up under that pressure. Dog training is a physical skill for both the human and the dog, especially for the dog. And I think that's something I learned as I became a better dog trainer, specifically when I did Karen Pryor Academy. Dog training is a physical skill. You have to physically know how to move your body, how to give a cue, how to deliver a treat, how to deliver a click. And so for the human, it's very physical, but for the dog, it's even more physical, because if you think about it, almost every cue we give a dog is asking them to physically move their body, physically move their position from a sit or a heel or a down or a come across a field, right? It's very physical skill for both the human and the dog. And what do we know about perfecting physical skills. There's a lot of data on perfecting physical skills, and most of us have done it in some other aspects of our lives. So if you dance, if you paint, if you've played tennis or any other sport, if you've done any kind of martial arts, if you've played any kind of instrument, these are all physical skills that you practice and perfect and get better at over time. Or you don't, but the more you practice and the more you move forward, the better the skill gets, the stronger it gets, the more reliable it gets. When we say practice, we mean practice and improve. It's a use it or lose it situation. If you don't go out and play tennis for 3 years and then you pick up a racket, you're going to be a little bit rusty. You're probably not going to be any better than you were 3 years ago. You're probably going to be worse than you were 3 years ago. Any reliable behavior in your home needs to be incredibly strong before you take it on the road. So you need to practice every single day, get a little bit better, and don't expect to then be able to perform it elsewhere until it's really, really, really strong in its home environment. So the old joke, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? It's practice, practice, practice. But practice is an expansive word. When we say practice, we do not mean do the same thing every day successfully. And I think a lot of us think that's what practice is. And when I was talking about this, I was like, that is not what practice is. You can't just do the same thing every day. What we really mean is step by step, you need to make improvements and challenge yourself. Add challenges to make the task just a tiny, tiny little bit harder. And that's what I was talking about when I said split, don't lump. You don't play Mary Had a Little Lamb one day and then Beethoven the next, right? You make little small improvements and you add very small challenges. And over time, you get significantly better. So if you do know how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, and it's funny, I think about this because I think I was in 2nd or 3rd grade and I was going to play the violin and I learned how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb on a violin. And I still remember the fingering one string for Mary Had a Little Lamb on a violin. I quit violin shortly thereafter. It wasn't for me. But I still remember how to play this one simple tune on a violin. But if you want to become a concert violinist, you don't practice Mary Had a Little Lamb every single day in your house. That's not going to get you very far. Eventually, Mary Had a Little Lamb will become perfect, but it will be perfectly boring. So then you can start to riff on Mary Had a Little Lamb. Be like, what does Mary Had a Little Lamb sound like if I do it like jazzy? Or what if I do it in a hard rock style? Or what if I do it Ella Fitzgerald style? You want to start riffing. You want to start changing things up with Mary Had a Little Lamb. And then if you really get good at it, then you might be like, hey, I'm ready to branch out and do some Twinkle Twinkle. This is going to be crazy. And then now you have 2 songs and you practice those 2 songs and you get better. But now your 2 songs are really boring because they're perfected. And you're like, we're going to go all out and start learning, When the Saints Go Marching In, because that's a little bit more complex tune. This is splitting. We're starting with something simple. We're making it a little bit harder. We're tweaking it. We're improving it. We're going a little faster. We're going a little slower. We're changing it up a little bit. We're just making slight changes, making a little bit harder and harder and harder. So what we really mean by practice is step by step, making small improvements and adding challenges when you are ready. So you're going to keep getting better, keep getting better, keep getting better. When you think you're at the point where you're like, I'm really comfortable here, I've got this down, then you add an additional challenge. You change something, you make it just a little bit harder. And that is exactly what you need to do when you're practicing a behavior with your dog. You want to make step-by-step improvements and add challenges. Practice does not mean do the same thing every day. Doesn't mean practice the sit in your kitchen with no distractions. I know your dog can sit in your kitchen with no distractions. right? That doesn't mean they can sit at the farmer's market when you're buying some produce. So how do you get to Carnegie Hall? You practice Mary Had a Little Lamb in your house. You get perfectly good at it. You walk yourself down to Carnegie Hall and you give a concert, right? Mary Had a Little Lamb. No, that's not what happens. It's much more complicated. There are a lot more steps. So if you're in second grade, you've learned Mary Had a Little Lamb, and maybe then you play it for your mom, and then you play it for your dad, and you play it at your little second grade auditorium concert. And then maybe you start taking private lessons, and then you do a little recital, and maybe you play it with another viola player, and you go on from there. And before you know it, you're in the high school band, and then you're in high school orchestra, and now you're going to college for music study, et cetera, right? There's a lot of little steps to get to Carnegie Hall. It's not just doing the same thing over and over. A lot of steps along the way, and there's going to be some pauses, some stopping, because you're going to need to spend a lot more time on some pieces than you had to spend on Mary Had a Little Lamb. And that's okay. That's how it should be. So practicing every day means making it a little bit harder, making improvements, adding challenges. So let's go to one of my most important behaviors, a downstay. If you're going to teach the down, the first thing you're going to do is lure the down. Then you're going to put the down on cue. Then you're going to teach the down with some duration. Maybe your dog can down for 5 seconds. Maybe your dog can down for 7 seconds. Maybe your dog can down for 30 seconds. This is going to happen over time. This is not going to happen in a day, right? To get a down with duration that is reliable and consistent, it might take you 3 weeks or a month to get to a 5-second downstay in your kitchen. Depends on the dog, right? Depends on what's going on. Depends on how busy your kitchen is. Then maybe you're going to want to do some distance. So the dog is on a mat in the kitchen while you're moving around the kitchen. Moving around is nothing but a distraction, right? So maybe you're going to now have a down with distractions. The kids are going to be coming through. You're going to be cooking. The cat is going to be meowing, whatever's going to happen. You're going to have to train all of these things, and you haven't even left your kitchen. This could take days, weeks, months. It could take however long as it takes. A lot of it depends on the dog. A lot of it depends on how much you practice. But you're going to want to do all those steps. You can do this, right? It just takes 2 or 3 minutes every single day, just making small improvements and adding challenges. So one of the things I'm going to say is go slow, make very small changes, split, don't lump. What that means is when you have a large behavior. So my large behavior, my Carnegie Hall is I want to take my dog with me to the farmer's market. I want to be able to shop, hold my produce, buy the things I want. My dog isn't pulling me all over the place. I want them to sit or lie down while I'm looking at stuff and checking things out. That's a big goal, right? And to get there, I'm going to have to split that final behavior of not pulling on leash while I shop. I'm not paying a lot of attention. And there's a lot of people, perhaps other dogs, and food, right? That's a huge goal. But I am going to get there by splitting this behavior into very, very, very tiny steps. I'm going to train it slow. Slower is faster. The more time you take training the basics, the faster you're going to get to your goal. If you go too fast, you're not going to make any progress. So if I want to train a behavior, I'm going to stop. I'm going to train it using positive reinforcement. I'm going to start in my house. And then maybe I've got my down. And I'm going to now say, okay, my down is really great in my kitchen and my living room, in the bathroom, and upstairs in the bedrooms. So I'm going to start practicing my down in the backyard. And I'm going to practice my down after it gets really, really good in my backyard. I'm going to practice it in my front yard, and there might be people walking by. I'm going to be just on my front porch. And then after it gets really good on my front porch, I might practice on the sidewalk in front of my house. Okay. And now I've got it down on the sidewalk in front of my house. And now I'm going to hang out on the corner at 5 a.m. Why am I going to hang out on the corner with a down at 5 a.m.? Because nobody's out at 5 a.m. So I'm going to be outside, out of my house, away from the front yard, on the corner, and I'm going to practice my downs at 5 a.m. before anybody shows up, right? Because it's going to be distracting. And then maybe if I want a down in the park, I might practice at the park at 2 p.m. Why am I practicing at 2 p.m.? Nobody's in the park at 2 p.m. Everybody's at work. Okay. So I'm going to go to an empty park. There's not going to be any kids. All the kids are in school. I'm going to go to the park and I'm going to practice at 2. And then I'm going to practice at 3:30. 3:30, the park is starting to get a little busy. Kids are walking through. They're getting home from school. Then I'm going to do the park at 6 a.m. I'm going to just totally mix it up. All right. We were doing afternoons. Now we're doing mornings. There might be people in the park at 6 a.m. There might be a lot of other people walking their dogs before they start their day. And then I'm going to go 7 a.m. because 7 a.m. is much, much, much busier. And then maybe I go to the park and I'm going to practice my down in the presence of one other dog. Maybe I invite a friend to come and all she does is walk her dog around the park while I practice my downs. Okay. And then I'm going to continue. This is just an example. I have split my downstay in a distracting environment into all these steps. And I will be honest, this isn't probably split enough. I've got to split this much further. So between the sidewalk and the corner at 5 a.m., I might have to add 4 or 5 steps in here. I might have to do the sidewalk at 5 a.m. and then sidewalk at 7 a.m. And then I may have to do the sidewalk with kids walking past and all sorts of other things, right? And then I might have to add some splits at the park going from 3:30 in the afternoon to 6 a.m. Maybe that's a little bit too difficult. Maybe I've got to add a whole bunch of splits in there. How do I know when to add a split? If things aren't going well, if the dog isn't progressing nicely and isn't doing the behavior you want, then your step is too big and you need to go back to where you were successful. I might have a day where I'm in the park practicing with one dog walking around. I'm practicing my dog. I'm practicing a down. We might have a terrible day and I might go all the way back and practice downstairs in my backyard the next day, right? So not only do we have to add splits, but we're going to go up and down this staircase as needed, okay? So, sorry, I'm too fast. You're going to add as many splits as you need in all the different locations, and you're going to go up and down. So as you can see, this is going to take some time. And like I was saying, I think building reliable behavior is an area in which trainers can do better for our clients. We need to explain this in more detail and provide training plans that help people learn how to get the behavior from the classroom into the real world. And this is how you would do it, as one of the ways you can do it. So, number 5, never stop using treats. All animals require continued reinforcement to maintain a behavior. How many of us would continue to go to work every day if we weren't paid in dollars? How many of us would stay on a diet if we didn't lose weight? How many of us would continue to exercise if it didn't make us feel good eventually? There's a million examples. Every behavior we do is maintained by some positive consequence. Even going to the relationship level. No, most people don't stay in a relationship that isn't giving them something back. Most of us have friends and family members and we have really good times and we hang out, but we get something out of that. And I know that almost everybody has had a relationship and where they stopped getting reinforcement from it and decided to move on. I'm no longer friends with that person. We don't hang out as much. It's not fun anymore. We've grown apart, whatever it is. All behavior requires reinforcement to be maintained. And this is true of our dogs. Never, ever stop using treats. And if this is a sticking point for you, I would love to have a deeper conversation about this, but it's a reinforcer. It's not just a treat. The other thing is, I have dogs. I keep dogs. It is absolutely my responsibility to reinforce them, to feed them. I have to feed my dogs. And so I find it really interesting that the same people are like, oh, I don't want to feed my dog all the time. I don't want to have to use treats. Why can't she just do it? Well, she can't just do it because no animal maintains any behaviors without reinforcement. That's just a fact of biology. The other thing is, you have to feed the dog anyway. The same people who complain about having to treat the dog too much think nothing about pouring 200 pieces of kibble into a bowl and putting on the floor and letting the dog eat it for free. Erica is indicating that there is a question.
We have a question. So, about the question I think is about other kinds of reinforcers as well. So, when we talk about reinforcement, are we talking specifically about treats, or are we talking about other things too?
Excellent question.
And would you repeat the question?
The question was, what kind of reinforcers are we talking about? I use the example of treats because in the dog training world, food works best for most dogs. However, a reinforcer is not a food item by definition. A reinforcer is any consequence that happens after a behavior that works to make it more likely that behavior happens again in the future. So, if your dog will work for a tennis ball, or will work for throwing a frisbee, or will work for a tug toy, or will work for praise, or will work for anything, whatever it is that will maintain the behavior, that's why we use the word reinforcement, not just treat, because a treat implies a food thing. So no, it doesn't have to be a food item. However, you have to test what you think a reinforcer is. It has to actually be reinforcing to the dog. So I've met a lot of people who said, well, my dog just works for praise. And that is true. But in my experience, that is true for a very small percentage of dogs, that they will actually work for praise. So what I would say is all reinforcers have to be tested, and they have to truly be reinforcing. And the way you know that is that the behavior is maintained or strengthened. Does that cover it? Do you have anything else to add? Okay. So no, a reinforcer is not necessarily food. It can be anything that the dog continuously works for. And that maintains or increases the likelihood the behavior is going to occur again. But it has to be some sort of reinforcement. If I was to go to work and my boss was to pay me in steaks, I'd be really happy because I do like steak, but I don't need 800 pounds of meat. I need American dollars, right? So even though it is a little bit reinforcing for me to work for food, what I really want to work for is dollars. So the other thing to keep in mind is the learner, in this case, the dog, gets to choose what the reinforcement is. We don't get to say, well, you should like this. You should work for this. The learner always gets to choose the reinforcement. Most little kids will work for candy, right?
We have a question about what kinds of treats are healthy.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I use a lot of different treats.
Repeat the question.
Okay, sorry. The question is healthy treats. I like using food treat. How do I say this? There are a lot of foods on the market that are such high quality that they can be used as treats. A lot of the freeze-dried food options for dogs, freeze-dried raw or dehydrated raw food, you can buy those and they come in small little sort of pelleted pieces that can be broken into smaller pieces. We've been using them to train our puppies. We have a litter of puppies on the ground right now, and they're great because not only are they nutritious, they're an actual fully functioning food item, but they're such high value that they do work for treats. I am a fan of single sourced meat products for most dogs. So Vital Essentials is a brand of treat that I use a lot, and they are single source. So it's either all beef or all chicken or all tripe pellets that I use as training treats. So any single source. Of course, one of the best treats is just like a block of cheddar cheese or, diced up into small pieces, or chicken, rotisserie chicken. I do try to use high value treats so that I don't have to worry about my dog's nutritional well-being during the life of their training life. But then again, some days, especially when you have a young dog and you're trying to build reliable behaviors, it's okay to use, bacon strips or, whatever your dog will work for. It's not going to be their continuous diet throughout their life. But in the beginning, when you have a young puppy, I think it's okay to err and, give them some McDonald's level treating every once in a while to get really strong behaviors. Yes. Go ahead.
We had another question about, would we suggest that people do treat tournaments or reinforcement tournaments? I'm not sure if that means like having them choose
a treat tournament. Whoever asked that question, can you tell us more about that? So what I'm thinking of as a treat tournament is I would go out and buy like 10 different bags of treats and figure out which ones my dogs like the best. And just, put one in the right hand, put one in the left hand, and see which one the dog wants. I don't know if that's what we're talking about, but yes, I would always say that you need to test a couple of things. You need to test what treat your dog will work for. You also need to figure out what treat, when given in large quantities, will not give them massive amounts of diarrhea, because nobody wants to. I mean, it's great to have a really well-trained dog, but nobody wants to have the additional consequence of having to clean up, runny stool all the time. So there is an art and a science in it, and it does take a fair amount of trial and error sometimes to find the best treat that works for your dog. If we learn more about treat tournaments, we will get back to that.
She said, in terms of different level of rewards, so you can use the higher and lower value treats depending on the difficulty level.
Yes. Okay. So that's another thing, right? So the person was saying, who is it?
Amelia?
Amelia. Thank you, Amelia. Amelia is saying you can use different levels of treats for different environments. And that is absolutely true. The easier the environment, the lower value the treat has to be. When you are training your dog in your kitchen and you're adding minor distractions like marching in place or clapping your hands or spinning in circles, you can probably get away with using their regular dog food for that. But when I take the behavior on the road and I'm like out at the farmer's market for the first time, I can guarantee you that I have got hot dogs and chicken breast and all sorts of goodies, high value stuff in my treat bag in those much more distracting environments. But yes, you can absolutely use different levels of treats for different levels of complex behavior. And what I say is, you want to use the smallest amount of treat that your dog will take. So I use very small pieces. I'd rather take one like small piece of chicken and chop it up into 20 little pieces rather than give the dog one giant piece of chicken, right? So you can use very small quantities of really high value stuff, which just makes the stuff go a lot further. I hope that makes sense.
Do you use use treats differently over time? Is it different teaching skills than when your dog is maintaining skills?
So I honestly, I use really high value treats right from the beginning And then as the dog gets better and older and more mature and more reliable, I use lower value treats. So I know a lot of people will use low value treats in the beginning, and then as the task gets harder, use better treats. I flip that around. I want to get the best, most enthusiastic responses from my 10-week-old puppy. I want them thinking and that learning is the best, most exciting. It's the best treats ever. It's the chicken, it's the hot dogs. And then by the time the dog is 3, you don't have to be doing that. You can be using a much lower level of reinforcement because the dog's 3 years old. They're through adolescence. They're through the really hard times. Their synapses is formed. They've got 3 years of practice under their belts, and they are much, much, much more likely at that age to be able to maintain behavior for a lower value treat. Okay. So I like to start training with really, really high value stuff. And as the behaviors become fluent, that's when I start lowering the value of the reinforcer. Now, there are exceptions to that. Say I'm taking my dog someplace and it's going to be a really challenging environment, like walk for the animals or some sort of dog event that, there's going to be tons of dogs on leash and lots of people and kids with food and all sorts of things. I don't care how old and how savvy and how well trained my older adult dogs are, I'm bringing out the big guns in those environments. So yes, I could talk about just the kinds of treats you give in different environments for an hour, because sorry, I have to move. It really makes a big difference. And it's sort of a day by day, minute by minute, year by year decision, what treat I use in what environment. Does that make sense? Are there any follow-ups to that? I will say the one thing I would say that I think is really relatively important is I start off with high value stuff when dogs are puppies. I don't start with low value stuff because I want to build intense desire and will to work with me. And so I don't mess around with low value stuff. I want to build that love for training right from the beginning. And I think that's a really important way, a really useful way of getting dogs into training. All right, let's see where we're at here. Awesome questions. Thanks, everybody. One of the things, I never, ever leave my house with a dog without treats. I don't care where I'm going. If I'm just taking them to the training center to pick up something, my treat pouch is as much a part of my leaving equipment as a collar and a leash. It's a habit. It's just part of the stuff I take with me when I go someplace with my dog. Can I tell you that when my dogs go to the vet, I take an entire 2 bags, depending on the size of the bag, but I will take 2 bags of treats with me. And if I go through the whole thing in the vet visit, I don't care. Right? I can't believe people go to the vet without a huge bag of training treats with them, because that's one of the most difficult things you have to ask your dog to do. So I always bring treats to the vet, and I would encourage everybody to do that. And it doesn't matter, as many as your dog needs. And if you have to deal with some loose stool later on, it's not that big of a deal. But like I said, it's a habit. I always, always, always have training treats with me when I leave the house with my dog. Even the adults. Okay, so those were the 5 steps. There's a secret 6th step that I didn't tell you about, and that is that you need to do your part. If you expect reliability from your dog's behavior, should they not expect reliability from your behavior? You and your dog are the team, and remember, you're a dance team and you're the lead. So it is incredibly important that you are as reliable as you expect your dog. That means you have to have the treats. You have to have the cues. You have to stay calm. You have to talk like you talk normally. You and your dog are working together to achieve success. So if I'm going to take my dog to the farmer's market, I'm going to be like in the car. I'm going to be putting the harness on. I'm going to be strapping on my treat bag, and I'm going to have my poop bag, and I'm going to have all the things I need. And I'm going to be like, all right, ready, 1, 2, 3, go. We've got this farmer's market. It's going to be me and the dog working to conquer the farmer's market successfully, right? We are a team going out to do this. We've put in the practice. We've worked really hard together. But what I want to really bring home is that you need to practice also. You need to do your part to lead this team. A successful leader is so important to the success of the team. And if you don't do that, like I was saying before, you're the lead. You're the subtle, like, here's the cue. I want you to come this way. I want you to come that way. Sit over here, sit over there. You're going to be clear. If you normally give a sit cue by saying sit and using a hand signal, just because your hands are free at the farmer's market doesn't mean your dog doesn't need the hand signal. You're going to have to figure out a way to make sure that you're communicating with your dog as clearly in the farmer's market as you are in your kitchen. You need to be consistent. Don't start using different cues or different tones of voice, right? Dog's going to be confused. You need to be thoughtful. So I keep using the farmer's market. It doesn't matter where you're at. If you need your dog to do a downstay, don't ask your dog to downstay in the middle of the footpath, right? Take them off to the side, go around behind a booth, ask them to downstay over there. Be thoughtful about what you're asking the dog to do. Can they do it in this environment? And be empathetic. Are they nervous? Are they worried about their tail getting stepped on? Are they overwhelmed by the noise? Is there a quieter place you can go? You need to watch your dog. You need to pay attention to them so that you can be an empathetic leader, an empathetic dance partner. So your part is to give clear cues, reinforce the behavior you like. If your dog is looking at you, if your dog is sitting voluntarily, reinforce all that with the whatever reinforcer you're using. Adjust the environment for success. Don't ask the dog to lie down in the footpath. Go to a quieter spot. Don't ask them to lie down next to the sausage guy who's cooking up delicious breakfast sandwiches. Maybe ask them to lie down next to the corn vendor, right? It's a little bit less tempting. And absolutely don't expect something you didn't train. If you haven't done it before in that environment, don't ask for it. You need to practice your part every day. You need to be fluent. What position is your hand in when you give the cue? How do you give the cue? When do you give the cue? Do you do it slowly? When you're out and your stress is up, are you saying it more quickly? Do you normally say sit? And when you're out in public, you're like sit, right? That makes a difference. It's going to affect how your dog responds. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? What is your cue? Make sure you know it's consistent. What is your position? Are you usually in front of the dog? And when you're at the farmer's market, you're on the side of the dog? These are all things that you want to think about as the leader of this team. And I put a little note down here. It's like driving a stick shift. If anybody's ever driven a manual transmission, you know that it takes some time to get smooth. You have to figure out, okay, in this car, I press the clutch, I put on the gas, I release the clutch, I press on the gas, I have to press on the clutch before I do the brake. When do I go into second gear? When do I go into third gear? You do not take that car onto the highway or into like stop and go city traffic until you are really, really good at that stick shift, until it becomes second nature, until you know without thinking how to shift, how to press the gas while you lift up the clutch, right? That's the kind of level of fluency you want to get before you really ask your dog to do these really complex, complicated behaviors in complicated environments. If you haven't driven a stick shift, I encourage everybody to give it a try. As the leader, I want everybody to ask what might make it hard for the dog to perform in these environments. And we always want to consider both the internal and the external factors that affect their performance. Internal factors include, how are they feeling that day? Did they pull their leg yesterday, so it's hard for them to lie down or sit and down over and over and over again? Are they scared? Are they afraid of the environment? Is it too loud? Are there balloons popping? Have they been there before? And do they know what to expect? That is huge. Somebody at, I think it was this past Clicker Expo, defined, was it fear? Do you remember? They defined fear, anxiety. They defined anxiety as not knowing what to expect. And when we talk about anxiety in dogs, we talk about, they're scared, they're fearful, they're worried, whatever. But this definition really hit home for me. Do they know what to expect? And if your dog doesn't know what to expect in an environment, that can lead to a lot of anxiety. And anxiety absolutely gets in the way of them being able to perform the task you're asking. So if you want your dog to regularly go to concerts or lie under a table at a restaurant or at a winery or something, do they know what to expect? Have you practiced it over and over? So they're like, okay, here we are. Here's a table. There's a towel under the table. I'm going to go lie under the table just like I've done 15 other times in other places, right? So defining anxiety as not knowing what to expect, I thought was really eye-opening for me. And so having your dog know what to expect going into these environments, right? Having practiced them when there's not as many people or on a calm day or a quiet day, a rainy day or something like that is really, really powerful and will go a long way to helping your dog give you a reliable behavior. So that's the internal factors. What are the external factors? Who's there? Are there 5 other dogs on leash? Is there a dog growling at them? Is there a puppy jumping on them? What are the people doing in the environment? Are they stepping on the dog? Are they trying to pet the dog? The dog doesn't want to be pet. Are they moving around the dog? Is there food on the ground? What level of distraction? So as the leader of the dance team or the partnership, you need to know, like, if I spin my dance partner to the right, they're gonna like crash into the chairs, right? I have to think about all of these things. What is the internal state of the dog? What are the internal factors that are going to make this difficult? What are the external factors? And then after you consider that for the dog, you need to think about you. I am totally guilty of doing this. When I get out in public, my dog's an extension of myself. And when they misbehave, I get embarrassed. And when I get embarrassed, what do? I yell at the dog because I want the dog to behave so that I don't feel embarrassed, right? I am aware that this can happen, and I try very, very hard not to do it. It's something I've done in the past, something I know is going to happen, and I am now prepared because I tell myself, oh, okay, you're feeling anxious because the dog isn't performing, and I do something that we call the get out of Dodge move, right? We just take the dog and we leave. It's like, take your ball and go home. If you're not having a good time, if the dog isn't having a good time, if things aren't going well, just create some distance. So what might make it hard for you? What internal and external factors are going to affect your performance? Are you nervous about how the dog is going to behave? Are there other dogs there? Are there friends there who are going to see you working your dog? Do you know what to expect? And what are the external factors? Is it more crowded than you thought? Is it raining and so the dog is all muddy and wet? What is going to make it hard for you? What is going to make it hard? What are the internal factors? How are you feeling? Do you have a cold? Did you sprain your ankle? And think about all these things before you go into this. Whatever your Carnegie Hall is. So I just took what was basically what I told you in the beginning, 5-step, simple steps. And we kind of got down into the weeds. And so now I want to back out of the weeds. You've got this. Everybody can build 1 or 2 reliable behaviors in their dog. Focus on your Mary Had a Little Lamb. Everybody can learn how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb on a flute, on a violin, on the harmonica, whatever it is, right? So focus on your Mary Had a Little Lamb. Just do it every day. get really, really, really good at it. And when Mary Had a Little Lamb is boring, try Twinkle Twinkle. That's all you have to do. It does get really complicated, but if you split into small pieces, both for you and the dog, as the dog learns their part, you're going to learn your part. You're both going to learn Mary Had a Little Lamb. And then you're going to be like, you know what? This is so easy. I think I can go on to the next step. And you're just going to do it every day, a little tiny bit, further and further. And over time, you are going to get a reliable behavior. If you build it, it will come. That's how reinforcement works. Reinforcement is building, it's securing, it's building up, it's making stronger. So if you keep making the behavior stronger, the behavior will become stronger. Split, don't lump, right? Makes tiny, tiny advances because slower is faster. And those are the two things that sort of guide my training all the time. Slower is faster, split, don't lump, and also don't forget to reinforce. That's it. If you guys want to come build some reliable behaviors with us, you can find us at woofsdogtraining.com. And I have some video I can show you of me doing some practice with my dogs today, or I can just jump into questions. Erica? We do have a request for video?
We have video with an exclamation
Okay.
point.
Okay. What time? What do we got? Time here? 3 o'clock. Okay. So a
Yeah.
couple of things. We've got lots of time. I'm going to show you some video. I was sitting out with my dogs this morning. So let me stop my share of this.
And I'll collect questions.
And Erica's going to collect questions. And then I'm going to, if we have time, I want to give you guys a little case study. I wasn't sure. Let's see. Exit here. Give me 1 minute to find this video that I want. And I'm warning you, it's not good video because I'm not a great videographer. Here we go. I'm sitting outside. This is our outdoor patio. The dog that's on the couch is our youngest. She's Kasha and she's 2. And I love her enthusiastic down. And so I wanted to show you, this is me working her down out on our couch. And here it goes. I'm tossing a treat to get her to leave, so she has to come back. And then I realized, there I go, toss the treat. Down. Down. Zephyr tried to get that one. But then I realized I've got 2 other dogs doing downs. I wasn't even working them. And then I was like, oh, look, they're doing the down. And I'm working the young dog. I'm working the 2-year-old. But watch her enthusiastic down. Down. Boom. Right? Yeah, I'm giving the 2 girls, the older girls, 9 and 6. The border collie is 9, the other dog is 6. And then I decide to test it even further and I throw treats, right? So I didn't just keep doing the same thing. I made it a little harder. Kasha comes back up. I call Zephyr and then she comes back. So this is just practice this morning. It's just me tossing treats, asking my dogs, asking the young dog to down. And then I realized the other 2 dogs were downing also, right? So it's an easy behavior for the older dogs. It's a slightly more complex behavior for the younger dog. Although I will say, I love her down. It's super enthusiastic. She does not need to practice it at this environment. But that's not the point. Practice is practice. Practice is helpful. Reinforcement makes behavior stronger. So the more I practice that, even in an environment that they're already good at, the better it's going to become. And I wanted to show you that because it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be beautiful and set up. I had some Chicken Little treats and I just started throwing treats and practicing Kasha's down because I think her down is adorable and I want to get a nice one on video. And it doesn't have to be beautiful and it doesn't have to be long. It can be 3 or 4 minutes. All you need to do is do the behavior so over and over, make it a little bit harder each time, like when I toss the treats, and just keep practicing. Just keep swimming, basically.
All right, so I'm gonna come closer so I can be on microphone for this. So Amelia had a couple questions, and I think it's going to be complex. So
Okay.
I'll read it, but then you might also check the chat to see what Amelia's responses are. So she says, what advice would you have in regards to timing of reinforcing behavior? Because this is always an issue. Like if the behavior is not quite on point and you end up building a reliable undesired behavior. And she also used an example like in the downstay, you're giving the reward when the dog is just getting up or like coming out of the behavior, or you're accidentally maybe reinforcing popping out of the downstay.
Right.
So
awesome. Excellent question. So one of the things I will say is don't worry about it too much because dogs are incredibly forgiving. And even if we're not perfect, they will eventually figure out what behavior is that we want. That said, getting your timing right, putting the treat in the right place at the right time is you doing your part, right? And you might want to take a class. My thing is I want to make it as easy as possible for my students to be successful when training a downstay. One of the ways I do that is when I'm teaching students to teach a dog to down, we always put the treat on the ground between the dog's paws, okay? If I deliver the treat in the same exact spot every single time, the dog can learn to expect it there, and I don't have to make a judgment call. When to treat, where to treat, to give it to them in their mouth, were they getting up, were they getting down? The treat is always on the ground. So there are some tricks that a good trainer can help you so that you don't have to worry about those questions. And it becomes like driving a stick shift. I always treat in the same spot at the same time. So I don't have to think about it all the time. So one of the things with the down, every single down I teach, treat on the floor between the paws, on the floor between the paws, on the floor between the paws. The reason is when you're training a down, if the treat is on the ground, the dog is looking down. And they're going to stay looking down. If the treat is constantly appearing on the ground, there's no reason for the dog to start getting up. So there's little tricks, timing, location, treat delivery. This is why I say training is a physical skill. You have to practice your physical skills. You have to practice your timing. You have to practice your treat delivery so that you get it right to help the dog. Now, again, I go back to the other thing. Dogs are super forgiving. So even if you're not perfect, they'll still figure it out. But the better you're at, the better lead you are, the faster the dog is going to learn the dance steps. Does that make sense?
I have something to add to that too.
Erica has something to add. What would you like to add?
I will add my disembodied voice. One other thing I would say is if you're in a situation where you're accidentally reinforcing a behavior you didn't want, one of the biggest things you want to do is see what you can change in your setup or the environment so that you don't have that happen again. So like in the downstay example, absolutely, making sure that the food is coming in the position they're supposed to be. One of the classics is barking at the window. If they bark at the window and you call them away from the window, and then sometimes they can learn to go bark at the window to get you to give them treats. Figuring out how to change the environment to make it either less likely that they bark at the window in the first place or more likely that you notice before they bark at the window, or where can you change where you're sitting so you're not they're not barking at the window and then running to get food from you. You're sitting in front of the window so that they didn't get to the window in the first place. Right. Is there something you can change in the sequence of your behaviors or, where everybody's located that makes it so you don't keep having errors basically.
Right.
And then it'll be easier to reinforce the correct responses instead of reinforcing the mistakes.
Right. So I would say that, if a mistake happens sort of 3 times in a row, it's time to stop, discontinue the training, have a think, figure out what you want to change, and then try it again. So that's what I would do.
Great question.
Yeah, that was awesome. Timing is something that we teach in the first night of our classes. We have something called the click-talk rules. Click-talk, TOC, it's timing, order, and contract. So that's something we teach right from the start. And if you do any of our classes at WOOFS, our first night is without the dogs. And that's so that we can teach the lead, spend some time doing that. Joanne, I like what your vet behaviorist says. Defines anxiety as anticipatory and fear as to a reaction to something in the environment. Yeah. And it's a lot better if they know what to expect and they're okay with it. So I really like all that. I did have a case study that I wanted to talk about. So, and it's got some really interesting things that we did discuss, including taking into account the external and internal things that can cause trouble. So I have a client who has a dog, and I just got a text yesterday or today, I can't remember, that the dog ran out the front door, ran across the street to the neighbors where they have a little doggy friend, and didn't come back when they were called. And the person had to go over there, grab the dog by the collar, and drag them home. So what is the training solution to this problem? For me, the training solution to this problem is to teach the dog not to go out the front door. A lot of people will see this problem and think that it's a recall problem. I don't think this is a recall problem. I think this is a going through the door problem. And the first thing I would teach is for the dog to go and station in a specific location every time the front door is opened. And I would train that constantly. The thing is, we want to take into consideration the internal and external factors for this dog. The internal factors, it's a adolescent active breed dog. Okay. So for those of you who haven't heard me talk about adolescence is the worst part in a dog's life. It is the most difficult. When they're tiny, they're easy. They follow you. They want to do everything you ask. They're like, oh, I'm 10 weeks old. Please just love me and cuddle me. And then at like 15 months or 12 months or whatever, they're like, oh my God, I don't need you. I do what I want. I don't listen. I've never heard my name before. I've never heard the word sit. I've never heard the word come. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the dog's synapses in their brains are actually, they formed and now they're breaking and then they're going to reform. And I tell everybody that the other side of 2 years old is awesome. And you just need to keep swimming. And what I mean is you just need to keep training. Just keep training, just keep training, just keep training. And on the other side of 2 years old, all those synapses are going to come back together and you're going to have a really lovely dog. But adolescence is tough and we need to make considerations for the adolescent brain. And so for this dog, I don't think a recall is going to work yet. I don't think once the dog gets out the door and knows that their friend lives across the street, the reinforcement from the playing with the friend is going to be too strong. It's going to be so much stronger than any chicken or hot dogs or cheese that I can come up with that I'm going to get trumped. The playing with the friend is going to trump any food that I can give them right now. Eventually, I am confident that I can get a good recall on this dog. But in their adolescent brain time, I don't think that's going to work. But what I do think will work is mat work, station training. And I think the plan for this dog is going to be teach the dog not to go out the front door. Because once the dog is out the front door and heading for the neighbors, I don't think you've got a chance to get the dog back. Yeah.
Although the owner in question says that she's still helped.
The cheese still helped. Yay! The owner in question says the cheese still helped. You were supposed to remain anonymous.
They're still anonymous.
They're still anonymous. Okay, cheese still helped. So, but what I would say is like that to me is sort of a recall problem, but that's not what I would address. What I would do is let's solve the problem by not letting the dog get out the front door in the first place. And we can do that much more easily by teaching a downstay on a mat inside the door. And I'm not talking about like 2 feet from the front door. I'm talking like 10 feet from the front door. And what we would do is we would just start reinforcing the dog for being in a certain position anytime a person stood at the door, just anywhere near the door. I would approach the door. I would reinforce on the mat. I would approach the door, reinforce on the mat. And I might do that for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, I'll put my hand on the door handle. I won't open the door. I won't even jiggle the handle. I'll just touch the handle and I'll treat the dog for being on their mat. And over several weeks, I will then open the front door. And every time I open the front door, I want the dog running to their mat. Open the front door, dog running to their mat. I think that could be a possible winning combination. Stay tuned. That's what I'm going to suggest, right? I'm going to also suggest working on the recall, but we're not going to work on the recall for this situation because the recall is nowhere near ready for this level of on the roadness, right? That person, Carnegie Hall, is having the dog come when called as the dog is running to their doggy friend's house. That's a big ask, and that's going to take a really long time to train. We're not gonna not train that, but I think it's going to take longer than the solution that I'm thinking, which is to keep the dog in the house in the first place. Just some suggestions, but that's a real life situation, right? This person needs both a reliable recall and a reliable, hey, don't leave the house unless you're cued to come with me. So, definitely something that we need to work on in the future. Anything else?
Kristen would like to know if you're willing to teach people how to drive your stick shift since you're saying everyone needs to learn how to drive, so no one will let her.
Sure. You can drive my car. Not a problem. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy teaching people how to drive a stick shift, and it's a lot of fun.
That was not the answer I expected. I think that was everything. I think that's everything. Amelia said thank you.
Oh, no worries. That's awesome. All right.
If that's it, I want to thank you very much. I, in fact, learned how to drive stick shift on my father's Corvette.
Awesome.
I couldn't believe that he let me drive that car, but he did.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I learned on a much older
anything.
car. It's a lot easier to learn on a car.
But I kept burning out clutches, so
yeah.
Eventually, not his.
Not
thank
his.
God.
Smart.
No, not his. Mine. I started burning out clutches. But anyway, oh, what a cute. There's a dog
I prefer a clutch. That's right, Brenda. It's hard to find one.
Anyway,
All right.
Thank you very much. This was very helpful. And I like the way you divided it into steps. And
Absolutely.
Erica, thank you for handling the questions. That makes my life so much easier.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.